Hello, you absolute legends. When you think about iconic tricks in speedrunning, it's hard to find one that is more ingrained into gaming culture than the classic backwards long jump in Super Mario 64. It is undoubtedly one of the most well-known glitches in gaming history, and its impact on Super Mario 64 has been tremendous. Normally, when we think of the backwards long jump, or BLJ as I'll refer to it, we think of stairs. Stairs are by far the most common place we see this glitch being performed. Not only because stairs are the easiest place to do it, but also because it's where the glitch can have the biggest impact. Using BLJs, we can skip the endless staircase that requires you having 70 stars to reach the top. And before that, you can use BLJs to skip the 50-star door. You can even use a more advanced version called a side backwards long jump to skip the 30-star door. And when combined with the lobby backwards long jump, you can skip the 8-star door at the beginning of the game as well. This one trick alone is responsible for allowing speedrunners to beat the entire game without attaining a single star. And in my experience, breaking the game completely is what BLJs are primarily known for. And it's easy to understand why. The usual premise of BLJs is that you can attain so much speed because there is no speed cap in SM64 when going backwards. And because of this, you can go so fast that you can pass through solid doors or even into parallel universes. However, they aren't only used to skip entire sections of the game. For example, in the level Hazy Maze Cave, runners use BLJs on lifts to gain enough speed to pass through walls. I wouldn't describe this as game-breaking per se, as you're still actually collecting the star. This is merely using BLJs to take a shortcut. And in the 120-star category, even though runners already have enough stars to simply walk through the 50-star door the normal way, these days they use BLJs to go through anyway, because it allows them to skip the text boxes that appear when you first open the door. So again, it's not really game-breaking, it's just a faster way of doing something you could otherwise do without any major glitches. But here's what's interesting. Every single implementation of BLJs in full game speedruns involve attaining enough speed so that you can pass through a barrier. However, when you really think about it, why is that the case? If BLJs allow you to get so much speed, couldn't we just use them everywhere all the time, simply just to go fast? Going fast is the entire point of speedrunning anyway, so surely BLJs should be useful just for the insane speeds they allow you to reach. And indeed, if you watch a tool-assisted speedrun, that's exactly what they do. They use BLJs all the time purely to reach insane speeds to move around levels quicker. But you never see this done in a real speedrun, at least until now. For the first time in history, we are starting to see BLJs incorporated into speedruns purely for speed. For decades, they were just deemed simply too difficult to control. But after years of theory crafting, we have finally seen the first implementation of a BLJ purely to get from A to B a little bit quicker. Granted, the time save isn't huge, it's merely 2 seconds, but it's already resulted in 2 incredible new records. And in my opinion, just the fact that this new BLJ has been used at all is pretty astounding. In today's video, we will take a look at this new strategy, the new world records, and if there are any more potential new BLJs on the horizon. I really hope you enjoy. As I said before, the idea of using BLJs to move around levels quicker isn't entirely new, as they have been used in tool-assisted speedruns for many years. And this is even true when it comes to single-star runs as well. As the name suggests, these are speedruns of a single star only. Naturally, this means you can retry the same star over and over again, and you can use more difficult strategies. This is why single-star speedruns showcase tricks that you rarely see in full-game runs. A great example of this is Blast to the Lonely Mushroom on Tall Tall Mountain. In full-game runs, they grab the box and bounce their way to the star. But in the single-star world record, they take advantage of some sloped terrain to BLJ their way to the star much faster. This particular strategy has been used in single-star runs as far back as 2013, and saves around 4 seconds, which is pretty significant, but it's just so hard to execute that I can't imagine it being used in a full-game speedrun anytime soon. especially because Tall Tall Mountain appears so late into the speedrun. The BLJ that was recently used to achieve new world records in full game runs appears in the second Bowser stage, Fire Sea, and is almost just as old. All the way back in 2014, the speedrunner Akira did something that shocked the community. Normally in Fire Sea, after you climb the pole and ascend higher into the level, you need to make your way back across the level to some ramps. However, Akira took advantage of the rising elevator just after the pole to perform BLJs to get enough speed to fly straight to the ramps directly, thus saving around 2 seconds. So since 2014, the individual level world record has always included this BLJ, but it was never used in runs because it requires an immense amount of precision. For starters, the lift that you're using is moving, so you need to time things perfectly so that the lift is in the correct position when starting the BLJs. Then the BLJs themselves need to be done at the perfect tempo so that Mario has the perfect speed when he leaves the lift. Everything needs to be done essentially perfectly, because you need to go exactly fast enough to make it all the way to the ramp and then be able to stop. And if you go too slow, you won't make it to the ramps at all. And the positioning of the lift is important because you also need to be at the perfect height when you gain enough speed to begin moving. Honestly, mere words don't really do justice as to how much precision was required to execute this trick, at least the way it was done until recently. Because as is the case with many tricks in speedrunning, oftentimes they are very difficult to do until someone creates a setup. A consistent and easy to follow series of inputs or cues that puts Mario in the perfect position. The best example in Mario 64 is probably Cannonless. It used to be one of the most inconsistent and notorious stars in the game, until a setup was found by Stockfolder in 2014 which made the star elementary to collect. And since then, more and more setups have been found that were faster and faster. Fire Sea, on the other hand, didn't seem to see much change in the way the BLJs were performed. Over the past decade, the world record for Fire Sea had been lowered from 33 seconds by Akira in 2014 to 30 seconds in 2024 by Parsi. And while the way each player did the BLJs did differ slightly, they all involved wall kicking all the way to the top, with Mario ending up to the left of the lift. Then they turned around and jumped back to the right into the lift to perform the BLJs. And the BLJ was essentially entirely relegated to single-level runs until only relatively recently, with the runner Parsi first trying it in full-game runs in mid-2024, with several other runners following his lead. And while some runners did manage to pull it off a few times, it wasn't until December when the legendary runner Ouija found a much more consistent setup. The setup seems pretty complex, at least from my simple mind, but this time it ends with a ledge grab and Mario ending up on the right side of the lift at the top. This ledge grab seems to have been first introduced by the runner Kano in mid-2024, and he seems to have some pretty decent success with it. However, it took Ouija making some slight adjustments to make the full setup as consistent as it could be. There are a lot of moving parts here. It even uses music cues to time certain actions, which is part of the reason why the ledge grab makes things much more consistent, as you can use the music to begin Mario's climb, instead of just relying purely on feel. Suddenly, the Fire Sea BLJ went from a very inconsistent trick to something a great player could perform most of the time. According to Suigi, the greatest player ever, he could now do it around 70% of the time. And thus, of course, Suigi would begin attempts to use the BLJ with the new setup to break his own existing world records. And that wouldn't take long. On the 6th of March, Suigi would break his 1-star record by 1.5 seconds.
Yo, dude! Oh my god! Oh my god, it's the oldest PB I've ever beaten in my whole life. That's it! That's it! 656. Oh, dude, let's go! Oh my god.
And I also have to point out, just look at how perfect his BLJs were leading up to the final Bowser stage. And then on the 7th of March, the very next day, he would break his own 0-star world record by 1.5 seconds as well.
Oh, yes, dude! Oh my god, that was so fucking close. What the fuck am I doing? Oh my god. Oh my god! This is so fast, dude! What the hell is happening?
And again, the BLJs leading up to the final Bowser stage were absolutely perfect. As it stands, Suigi is now 12 seconds ahead of second place in the 0-star category, which is absolutely mind-blowing. This is one of the biggest relative leads in a popular speedrunning game that I've ever seen. He basically just repeated his existing world records, but this time included the new strategy. So any hopes other players may have had of using the new BLJ to gain an edge on Suigi's existing records have been dashed. This trick can be used in the 16-star category, however, so as of right now, Suigi's amazing record there is a little bit more vulnerable unless he decides to go back and do it again with the Fire Sea BLJ included. But Suigi's 16-star record was one of the greatest runs in the history of speedrunning, so beating it even with the new strategy would be extremely difficult even for him. So where do we go from here? Are there any other places where a BLJ could be used to save time? Well, as it turns out, Fire Sea isn't the only Bowser stage where this type of strategy has been used. In the individual level speedrun for the first Bowser stage, Bowser in the Dark World, a BLJ is also used. This, on the other hand, is likely orders of magnitude more difficult. The first time a BLJ was ever used to achieve a new record in this level was back in 2019 by the runner Miko. And just by looks alone, you can already tell that this is a crazy strategy. This first successful run using the BLJ would remain the world record for almost 4 years, because no one could replicate it. Then it ended up being beaten in 2023 by Tag 609, and it was beaten by disregarding the BLJ entirely and instead using a different strategy later on in the stage. However, since then, the runners Xandri64 and Parsi have both used the BLJ to break the record multiple times, with Xandri64 now holding the top spot. The BLJ strategy on Bowser in the Dark World seems to save at least 5 seconds if done well, which is monstrous. And not only that, it's right at the very beginning of the run, which is perfect because you don't have to lose as much time trying it over and over again. So if any kind of reasonable setup is ever found, even if it is executed poorly, it would still make a huge difference. As of right now though, this strategy is purely individual level only, but I don't think it's going to be that way forever. I think at some point in the future, some crazy maniac will be able to pull this off in a full game run. It's just a matter of when. Though I think just the implementation of the BLJ in Fire Sea alone has probably inspired some runners to have a very long hard think about where other potential BLJs could be used elsewhere as well, even if it is just to save a second or two. Thanks for watching, you legends. I hope you're having a fantastic day, and I will see you in the next video.